This guide was created using the consultation of top-level and mid-level players along with my own expertise. We won't waste any time and jump right in, starting with basic movement, then laning, moving into macro, character selection, and mental mindsets that will put you at the top of the global leaderboard, regardless of what rank you start at. So we'll set a foundation with what you're going to be doing throughout most of the game, which is movement. Pretty intuitive. You have a dash, you have a slide you can do after the dash, and if you shoot while you're sliding, you have infinite ammo. It's really, really simple, really intuitive. What is complicated, however, are some of the things you can do with it, but I'm going to go over some of the basic movement techniques that you can use to get around the map easier. So I want to go through some areas you can double jump up to that I even see high-level players fail to do, so this one's pretty easy. Really, really handy if you're attacking. Lets you get inside the patron pretty easy. You don't need to think too much about it. Make sure the guardians are down before you go in. But this is a great way to get a height advantage over the enemies, especially if they're retreating during a good push. So as you get better at the game, you start using these zip lines a lot less. They're okay if you don't know how to use some of the movement, but once again, a lot of your problems are just solved by double jumping. You can climb up here, go over here, don't even need to use the zip line. There's advanced movement involving wall jumps, but wall jumps really open up the map a lot more. So here's a really handy trick you can use with wall jumps. Just go up here like that, and melee bash to get up there, and this saves a lot of time, really good if you're trying to push from this angle. You see a lot of players at high level use this, but lower levels not so much, but I think it's pretty easy. Last thing I want to go through in terms of movement is just what's the fastest way to go through the map. And honestly, it depends on your preference, so I'm going to show you footage of 3 different ways, very common ways of going through the map, and just watch. So I'm going to freeze frame right when they hit the opposite wall, and they all hit it at the same time. So as you can see, it doesn't really matter what you use to get around the map faster. You're going to be using stamina anyway, so it's just whatever you prefer to use at any given time. So now that we have the foundation out of the way, we need to talk about the actual progression of the game. And the game starts with laning. You always want your carries to be on the side lanes, and the reason for that is pretty simple, because what don't you see in the center lane that you do see in these side lanes? And that's the tier 3 camps. So these camps are the most valuable camps in the game. They pretty much make it so that if you're not in the side lanes, you're pretty much screwed from the start, and I'll explain why. When these tier 3 camps spawn, you basically want to go for them as soon as possible, and I'll demonstrate. People say it takes a long time to kill these things, but let me just demonstrate right here. So I'm at the lowest possible level. It's like 22 minutes in. I have no items whatsoever, and look at how fast these things die anyways. And Paige is not like, I mean, her gun is okay for farming. It's not the best, but look at how fast these things die, even at level 1. It's ridiculous. So absolutely, when these things spawn in the middle of laning, you should go out of your way to get these things, because they're absolutely worth it. That's basically your objective in laning, is to secure these tier 3 camps. If you're finding that this takes a long time to kill, aim for the eyes. That's their head hitbox. When you do that, they take a ton of damage. It's really easy. But that's just, farming during laning. You do have to fight other players during laning, and I'll get into that right now. The worst thing you can do in laning is actually dying, because that sets the enemy up to snowball. So I'll show you an example right here. In this clip, you can see I'm missing half my health at the start of the game, so rather than let the enemy claim souls by killing me, I decide to turn around, hop on the zip line, that's why they're there, and head back to the base to heal, because you can heal inside your base, and then I come right back to resume laning without risking dying. Minutes later, you can see that was the right play. We managed to not only take the tower, but if you look at our soul total, we have a more substantial number of souls compared to the enemy. Because we didn't die and we didn't let them have souls, we managed to secure and maintain a dominant lead. And that doesn't mean that you should always go for objectives, because kills are very, very valuable in this game. So if you have a choice between either getting an objective or getting a kill, you should really focus on getting kills. And while we're on the topic of damage, one thing I can touch on here is just melees. Generally speaking, you always want to go for heavy melees, and there's 2 reasons for it. The first one is it does a ton of damage, but secondly, you can curve heavy melees. So I'll just demonstrate here. Even when I commit pretty hard to a heavy melee, if I see that the enemy parries, as long as I don't have like old man reflexes, right, I can turn away at any time. So rule of thumb, go for heavy melee, easy peasy damage, don't have to worry about getting parried whatsoever. It's a complete non-issue as long as you're paying attention. And if you're paying attention, you'll notice there's one thing I haven't mentioned, which is aiming. Deadlock is not an aim-intensive game whatsoever. To be honest, the third-person shooter elements are kind of just a visual thing. You want to focus on practicing your abilities more than you want to practice aiming. And using your abilities properly has a much higher skill ceiling than aiming could ever hope to have. Aiming is more like an afterthought whenever you're playing this game. What you should be thinking about is what's called macro. A macro is basically how you navigate the map, how you pick and choose fights, how you choose to take objectives. Even towards the middle and end of the game, one thing you always need to remember is it doesn't matter how late it is, deaths can still give the enemy an advantage that lets them snowball. So if there's any risk involved in taking an objective, you should really focus on avoiding dying more than dying for an objective. And that narrows down what macro is in the grand scheme of things, and that's just soul economy. Jungling has way more value to soul economy than creeps do. So whenever you push a wave up in a lane, you do that just so you can secure jungle camps. When you push up a wave, you always want to make sure that you farm the jungle camps behind the wave before you move up with them. The only exception to this is when you see your teammate fighting somebody, because remember, dying is what leads to snowballing. If you can help your teammate, doesn't matter if they're outnumbered or what, as long as you're there to give them an out, you should join in on a fight just to protect them. This is a team-centric game, so you need to work with teamwork to get ahead. Now there's an exception to this, and that's if your teammate has more souls than you. At that point, you should spend more time farming so you can have 2 strong players in the team instead of just 1. Now there's an exception to this exception as well, and that's if your teammate is fighting an enemy on the other team that has more soul value than both of you. That's a very important fight for you to win, because when you take them down, you get that soul economy for yourself. So when you keep all these rules in mind, you'll finally get a grasp of how macro is supposed to play out. Anyway, that's macro. By the end of the day, it all whittles down to just you look at your map. What is a bit more complicated, however, is itemization. Now, itemization is when you start seeing a split between low elo and high elo players. So if you're just starting out in the game and you want to understand itemization a bit better, you generally want to have an equal number of orange items, which are gun items, purple items, which are spirit items, and green items, which are health items. You want to have a nice balance, and that's generally the best way to go forwards. Now, as you spend more time with the game, and you get to a higher elo, and then you get to the rank where you'll find most competitive players, and we're talking about like actual pros, and that's around Archon or so, you generally never want to buy green items. Green items at that skill level are pretty much useless because it's better for your enemies to die than it is for you to have health, because they can't hurt you if they're dead. So you want to focus on whatever your main type of damage is to kill your enemy faster before they can hurt you. Anyway, making builds is very complicated, but I would say whether you're just starting out or even if you're a high-level player, you should generally use the Line Pro builds, and you can find them by searching for it. It's just Line Pro. He makes the best builds in the game, and if you follow the builds, you'll be tanky by the end of the game. They're very, very nice, and it gives you a good idea of how itemization should go for pretty much every character. Past itemization is selecting a character to play, or at least a roster of characters that you want to play as. If you don't mind sticking to the lower ranks, then just pick whoever you want to have fun with. Now, if you want to win, however, you want to pick a carry. So that'd be B7, Wraith, Bebop. Characters you want to stay away from, however, Shiv. Shiv is the hardest character to play in the game by far. He has this mechanic where you have 2 health bars or something, you need to heal, you have like a projectile attack that isn't hit scan. He's very difficult to play. He might be tied for the most difficult character to play in the game next to Mo. My advice, play Lash when you're just starting out. Lash is the easiest character, and no matter what, he is going to be a top tier character because Deadlock is a movement-based game, Lash is a movement-based character, so he's always going to be at the top of the tier list no matter what patch it is. We've covered just about everything when it comes to the gameplay mechanics. The last thing we want to focus on is mindset, and mindset is going to dictate a good portion of how well your games go, or at least how well you persist when you're trying to learn this game. There's people who tell me, why do you never seem to get tilted? You don't seem like the kind of person who plays MOBAs, which, you know, I'm not. But I can, at the very least, share with you the techniques that I use to stay in a positive mindset. There was an experiment examining stress where two rats were put in a situation that causes them stress. One had control over what stressed them out, the other one did not. And they found out that the rat that had no control over what caused them stress wound up being way more stressed than the rat that had some semblance of control over the stressor. Now, to apply it to your mindset, what this means is that to avoid becoming stressed when you're experiencing hardship playing Deadlock, you need to look outward rather than inward. If you lose, it's because of your team. If you're behind on souls, it's because of your team. If there's a bad matchup in lane, or their comp is better, it's because of your team. And most importantly, it's because of your sauce. Something else that's really helpful is finding a duo or even just a group of friends to play with. When you're in voice cons with each other and you're working with people that you're familiar with, you can really start to realize it's because of your friends. You just lost the game. Another thing is to never end on a loss. The more that you lose, the less likely it is that you'll lose again. The mindset you always want to have is never last one, always one more, because that implies that there's no end to how many times you can play the game. Keeping these techniques I've outlined in this guide in mind, from movement to macro to mindset, will help you climb the ranks and become a true Deadlock master. Some of you might be able to even start a career streaming or making videos for the game. Remember to always say that you're the rank 1 for whatever character you play. Nobody will ever check. I hope you use the advice from this guide and help make my games from here on out a lot easier to win.